Hello, everyone. Hello. Now we're on. Hello, everyone.
Okay.
This is Kathy from courtchatter.com, and I am so happy about today's show. We did take the summer off. For those of you that have followed these shows, we'd like to do these shows and keep you updated on the trials that we are covering on Court Chatter and that you guys are watching and following. Right now, we're covering the Colleen McKernan trial out of Canton, Ohio. And right now, the jury is deliberating in that trial. This is day 2 of jury deliberations. This is her second trial. The first jury was unable to reach a verdict in that trial. It was earlier this year in April, and they hung, and the judge declared a mistrial. The state of Ohio has decided to retry her. The testimony ended, closing arguments were yesterday, and that second jury is now deliberating. So today I have a juror from that first trial as our guest, and we are so excited about that because what do we always say when we're watching trials? Oh, if we could just be a fly on the wall in that deliberating room and know what those jurors are talking about. And now we can know. So I'll give you just a really brief synopsis of the trial, and I'll just bring in our juror. Colleen McKernan was married to her husband, Rob, for just 8 months when on New Year's Eve, 2014, she killed him, basically. She shot him 10 times after they had been at a bar all night and then at a late night party, came home, and she shot him 10 times. Now, she says it was in self-defense. That is her defense in this case. She says he was coming at her. She claims he was abusive during their relationship and during their marriage, and that night he was they were fighting all night, that he had driven home drunk, that he'd gotten out of the truck, he'd carried her in, thrown her around. Anyway, lunged at her for the last time. She had a gun, shot him 10 times. That's her story. The state of Ohio says he wanted to leave, said he wanted a divorce. He was trying to leave. She wasn't going to have that. And she shot him and killed him. The first jury could not come to a verdict on that case. And now the second jury is in day 2 of deliberations. Will they be able to come to a verdict? That's what we're waiting to see. So we are just going to get right into this. I'm so excited. So I'm going to bring up our guest right now on the screen. This is Scott. Hello, Scott.
Hi, how you doing, Kathy?
Oh, I'm doing so good. And I'm going to let my moderators who I'm talking with let us know how our volume is and how our stream is. I'm also watching it. We've got Scott working on through his mobile, streaming through his mobile. So I just hope everything's going okay, and I hope the volume's okay. All right. So Scott, you were a juror on that first trial. And for those who don't know, you guys were split 7-5 and could not reach a decision. And what has been broadcast out there is it was split 7-5 for guilty. Now, the number one question that everybody's been sending me is, for my guest I have on today, what side were you on?
I voted to find her guilty.
All right, so you were on the side of guilt.
Yes.
All right, Scott, where do we begin? Why don't we start with the makeup of the jury? Tell me the gender makeup of the jury you were on.
It was 10 men, 2 women, and 2 male alternates.
Okay, so as we know, the alternates don't deliberate. So you had 10
male, and
10 men and 2 women.
Yes.
And just so everyone knows, the jury this time around is 8 women and 4 men. So they're a little bit different this time around. Okay, so let's just start out with, you're just your average guy living his just everyday life, going through life, and one day you get a jury summons, and then your kind of life turns around, right?
Yep, that's how it went.
And you find yourself in a courtroom. Now, one thing that I found interesting when I was talking with you is you did have a little, it's not what you do now, but you did have a little legal background. You just want to briefly talk about that?
Yes, I actually, I had I was married to an attorney for a while, and we ran a small family law practice in Port Orchard, Washington. And I worked as a paralegal for that. We ran that office for about 6 to 8 years. So I've been in the courtroom on both sides of the deal.
Okay, so you have a little bit of experience. You were a paralegal, so it was family law, but so you weren't afraid of this.
No.
All right.
In fact, I thought I could say something to get out of it, because
That's true.
the first question they asked me in 4D was, if you found out that the defendant was prior military, would you hold her to a higher standard? And being an ex-submariner from the U.S. Navy myself for 14 years, I said yes. She needs to be held to a higher standard. I thought that, but they selected me.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so Colleen testified in her first trial and her second trial, which it's very rare to see a defendant testify. So I don't know if you know that, but we don't see that very often. And there was a lot of tears shed. Well, okay, yeah, we'll get to that.
Okay. Okay.
Scott's a doubter. Okay, let's back that up just a little bit. So in the first trial, we already know you voted guilty. So one of the first questions I want to ask you is, you're supposed to keep an open mind throughout the entire trial. That's one of the instructions the judge gives you, is to not completely make your mind up. Now, we're all human, and everybody in that jury box is human. So we all know that you probably have at least an inkling of what you're thinking during the trial. And that doesn't mean that you don't have an open mind when you go into the deliberation room. But how early on in the trial did you side with one side or the other early on? And did you change your mind during the trial?
Let me explain this, because I remember it vividly this way. Okay,
Great.
going through all the testimony, and at closing arguments, okay, the state gets up, spells out their the way they think the course of events went, and I'm on the front row of the jury box, and they're right in front of me, and I'm shaking my head. Yeah, I get you. I'm following you. I don't know about the premeditation or the other stuff that they were trying to infer, but yeah, I'm with her. Okay. Ian Freeman gets up, starts to rebut what the state said, and that's frankly,
sorry to interrupt, but Friedman, it was the defense attorney the first time around.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. I found myself nodding my head in agreement. Well, yeah, I can understand that. That's kind of probable, because so at closing, I'm still going back and forth. Okay, because of the way they presented. I had no information or experience with the battered spouse syndrome defense or any of that. So taking everything at face value, yeah, okay, I agreed. But then it was really studying the photographs, okay, and realizing we weren't going to get the DNA moment of an out where we can rest our judgment on a scientific fact, right? These were the order of the bullets, and this is how it was, so it had to go this way. There wasn't anything like that available for us. And then when we asked to review the booking video.
Okay, let me just stop you right there for just a second. Okay, so let's back up just a minute. So you said you weren't going to know the order of the bullets. For those that aren't completely familiar, each side has put up at least their theory of the order of the bullets, right? So the prosecution thinks they came in one order, and the defense thinks they came in one order. And what you're saying is that you weren't convinced that either side could prove the order, right?
Correct. Because we actually had forensic testimony that said there's no way to know exactly the order of it.
Perfect.
They didn't know which bullet was one and which one was two.
Okay, so all right, so don't jump ahead to the jail video yet. So
okay, sorry.
No, don't be sorry. So you you did say something interesting to me though while we're on the order of the bullets though. You said I guess I will jump ahead a little bit. You said in the deliberation room that so you did not believe there are 2 bullets that hit him in the mouth. We know that of the 10. Right. And tell me about the 2 bullets. The defense believes what about those 2 bullets? The defense.
That they were the first 2 shots.
As he was coming toward her.
Correct. Okay. I've got something to tell you about that too that happened in the first trial. Okay, I don't know if you want me to regress to that, but okay. Okay. They actually taped out and set up the hallway on the floor in a pattern like on the floor of the courtroom in front of the judge's desk, right? Colleen McKernan actually stood up, put herself where she was standing in that hallway, right? And as to where the stairs going down to the door was, as to where the opening for the kitchen was, and as to the dining room living area. Okay? They put the gun in her hand and she was going through the motions. And the defense went through and said, this is how it happened. The state had her ask her one question. What was Rob's reaction when you pointed the gun at him? She involuntarily raised her hands above her head instead of towards her. She says, he went like this. Oh. And brought her hands down real quick, which I thought was pretty freaking telling. You know, that's kind of a Freudian slip, right? The judge even noticed that and asked us that after we ended our deliberations. You know, I just to regress there. Isn't that interesting? Okay, so what was your question again? The defense theory. In fact, the defense attorney of this trial actually nailed it a little bit better than the first one, because I didn't even realize or recognize the fact that his mouth had to be closed for that bullet to hit both lips, the upper and lower lips. Okay, which how is his mouth open and yelling if he's doing that? Plus, there was no blood. I've had a tooth pulled. They bleed badly when you have a tooth pulled, in my opinion. So how could you stumble back 4 to 5 feet, no droplets of blood anywhere, okay, and yet his teeth were around his head, laying on the floor. It just didn't go. It went against my common sense when I started looking at it and studying that. So I do not believe that the first 2 shots were in the mouth. Okay, so you'd have dropped right there.
So I love this because so my basic question did you start making up your mind? Did you switch back and forth during the trial? And it sounds like you really were weighing everything throughout the entire trial, because you were like, oh, the defense attorney really did have a good point here. Oh, the state really made that, like, that doesn't make any sense what the defense is saying. So you were keeping an open mind throughout the trial.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
I was going to say, one thing that I don't think they really emphasized, because I didn't hear any testimony in this trial on it, because I've been following it all the time. That's all we watch all day, it seems like sometimes. But there were close to 33,000 text messages that we were able to review.
Oh, you guys read them all?
We didn't read them all. We read a majority of them, and it showed a pattern that, in my opinion, okay, granted the relationship was toxic. It was. They got married too soon. They didn't know each other well enough to get married that soon, and but it was always she is extremely controlling, and it came through in those text messages. It really did. And to the end where he was like, listen, I just don't. They never said it. They said the one about how he deserved to get his butt beat because no one should have done that. He was just feeling contrite, in my opinion, at that point in time, because he doesn't normally want to act that way. But I believe she would push his buttons to the point where he didn't know whether to come or go. And you can read that in the text messages.
Okay, so that is the big sticking point that I am seeing from most of the trial watchers and in our chat room, is they are not believing that she was a battered woman or that he was an abuser, at least not to the extent of that she is telling, because one, this is why I love the trial watchers, and this is why I love our chatters. They bring their real life experiences, just like you jury members do, to these trials. And either they know somebody that was abused, or unfortunately they've been abused themselves. They have real life experiences with this. And they say that she does not behave like a battered woman or somebody that was abused, because you don't wake up your husband in the middle of the night to yell at him about money, or if he is an angry drunk, you don't go out to the bar drinking with him. You know, those kinds of things, that she didn't behave. Her story wasn't jiving with what the real life facts were saying. And that's exactly what you were seeing, right? That's exactly what you're saying.
Correct. And watching the booking video in its entirety brought that into extreme focus. They didn't testify to it, but at one point, and she was nervous, but she wasn't remorseful or distraught. One thing, if you actually get a chance to watch it, the thing she used to do, she has this nervous twitch where she rubs her feet together continuously through this entire hour and a half. It seems like she's just sitting there rubbing her feet together. She asked if Rob was dead, okay? But the way she asked it was he dead on the scene? Was he dead on scene? She was trying to talk in a military security fashion to like connect with the cops that were booking her, as like that she was one of them. She was talking as if she was dead on the scene. She did start off statistics about spousal abuse. She did say that I told his mother that if he put his hands on me again, I would kill him, with a little expletive in there. She whispered to herself that I actually murdered someone. I just murdered someone. It's like, so she was cognizant of what she did. And so everything that she did after shooting Rob was to set up a alibi or reasonable defense.
Interesting. Okay, so you're talking about the police interview, and also you touched on when she was like in her jail garb, and just a video showing her that we saw just a brief bit of in the closing argument, which we thought was very powerful. We didn't get to see either one of those in their entirety, and they're not out there yet for us to watch. So I will be, if I can ever get my hands on either one of those, then we will have that and be able to watch it. But you guys did watch those, and that was, for you, that was very telling on the opposite of the poor, meek, battered woman, abused woman.
Exactly. In fact, they gave a brief snippet of her yelling, telling someone to shut up. Right? That actually lasted for about 5 minutes. They were bringing some other offenders into the booking room that were kind of drunk and loud, right? And she didn't like that being loud. She wanted to control that situation. Right? But you know what I'm saying? No, be quiet. I want you to be quiet. I don't want to hear your crap. Well, I'm in a booking room just getting booked for murder. I'm concerned by someone else being loud? No, I'm concerned about what my situation is. She was cognizant and aware of everything going around her. It was very interesting.
All right, so then let's move now to the deliberation room, because everything you're saying is exactly what most of the trial watchers have been saying about her coming across as way too controlling to be this battered woman. So what you're saying is really agreeing with the majority of the people that have been watching the trial. And so now we get to deliberation rooms, which is why people can't figure out the people that voted not guilty and who believed her. So we want to talk about deliberations, and we want to talk about the misconception that people think that the 7-5 split, that 5 were not guilty, and that's not necessarily true, right?
Correct.
So the first thing I want to ask you about is the 5 on the other side. So the 5 on the other side, what was the gender makeup?
4 male, 1 female.
Okay, so, and I've talked to you about this before. The 4 male voted
not guilty.
So there was 4 men who bought her story.
Well, I can't speak for what they thought. What I can tell you is what 3 of them basically told us that, that they felt her testimony was credible.
Okay.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
And the other one, who actually sat closer to me, he wasn't so convinced that it was credible, but he was trying to. He didn't believe that the state met the requirements for the charge.
Okay.
I basically think he just couldn't bring himself to say guilty to a murder charge on another human being. That was my thing. And as well as the female, she never decided one way or the other.
So that's what a lot of people don't know. The 5th person was a female, and she wasn't not guilty. She just was undecided. She was just floating in the wind.
Right. Her last statement, I remember her saying, was, "My heart tells me one thing, my mind says another."
Oh my goodness. I wonder, do you know anything about her? Did she have any abuse in her background or in her family? Yep, I could have guessed that.
She did. Yeah, she did. She did indicate that. So that's the thing about bringing
personal life experiences, and that's what happens with juries. That's what we do. We're human, and jury members are human, and they bring their personal life experiences in, and that's the whole vetting process of during jury questioning. And she brought her life experience into it and couldn't get past that. Maybe there was abuse there. There is something to be said. Rob maybe did have anger problems, and maybe there was some stuff going on there, and she probably couldn't get past it. Okay, let's get back to deliberations. So why don't you just walk me through the first, you get in there, and what do we do? Do we take a vote? Do we elect a foreman?
Yes, we basically elected a foreman on the fact that as we got in, I pointed, let's take this guy because he dresses better than the rest of us. That's pretty much it. And he was actually one of the holdouts for not guilty.
Oh.
I introduced myself. I said, "My name is Scott. I don't want to be known as Juror 27. You can call me Scott." And that fell on the table like a flat rock in a pancake house because nobody else offered their name to me.
Nobody wanted to give up their names.
They wanted to remain anonymous.
Interesting.
And then I said that, no matter, like I told you before, that no matter what happens, we're all connected at the hip here from now on. Whatever happens, we're responsible. And from there, we actually didn't go straight to a vote. We actually went around and kind of asked each other, what do you know? How do you see the case? And so everybody kind of said what they heard and where they were at in their train of mind. And so at that point, this is what I think, this is what I heard, this is what I believe this. So it wasn't really like a vote, it was like a conversation of why they feel the way why they were going to say guilty or not guilty. Which I thought was good. I will say this, I'm remembering the one guy about the issues. I said, well, come on, 10 times and not missing. She's a qualified marksman in the Air Force. She's trained to, because they train you in the military, like to shoot for center mass 2 or 3 times, stop and reassess the situation. Right? She just unloaded. His answer to me on that was, I've told my wife with the gun that we have that if someone's breaking into the house, you shoot that thing till it's empty. And my argument back was, well, yeah, but that's not someone that you're sleeping beside on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Right? There's a difference between having an intruder and unloading and having someone that you're in an intimate relationship with and unloading. there was anger there, in my opinion.
That
I,
that
you know, I can't say anything.
So okay, so see, there's another personal life experience. This is what goes on. He knew that if you shoot, his feelings were if you shoot to kill. So he didn't have a problem with calling 10 shots. He didn't have a problem with unloading the weapon because in his mind, once you shoot, you might as well just go all out. That was pretty much his deal. If you're going to shoot, you might as well just keep shooting. And your thought was, yeah, but this was her husband who she was married to. So that for you, the 10 shots were a big thing for you, right?
Yes, they were. Yes,
Did other jurors like agree with him, agree with you? How did that conversation go? With the 10 shots?
Three of the other not guilties agreed that yeah, I tell my wife, you shoot that thing till it's empty.
Really? Okay.
You know, I says, well, I'm glad I don't know where you live. You know, because I couldn't believe that there was no wiggle room, there was no movement.
Okay, so that's one of the questions we have. So let me just get to a couple of the questions here.
Sure.
I have fight. We have nicknames in our chat room, so you'll get some interesting names. I'm getting questions from,
Sure.
but I like to give them their due, their shout outs here. So Fight for TA asks, was there one particular issue that kept the jurors from the unanimous decision? So was there one particular sticking point?
Yes. And that was, in fact, we even asked the judge to clarify, but she wouldn't. And I think it's because she couldn't, but the jury instructions were specific. And so when we started realizing that we were kind of getting into a deadlock situation, though a couple of us that were on the guilty side, look, let's just go back to the book. We opened up the jury instructions and we read it line by line. And the one jury instruction was that Colleen McKernan willfully, with intent, brought the gun to the situation, kind of like that. Brought a gun to the situation. Okay, we were split on when the situation started. What was meant by situation? Those of us that were guilty considered the situation starting in the hallway.
Okay.
Okay. And the jurors that were not guilty agreed that if the situation was started in the hallway, it would be guilty. But they argued that the situation started at the party at Brittany's, I think that was her name, Brittany's.
Right, yeah.
Place?
Yes.
Right. And that it was just a continuation because they believed her testimony about being drug into the house, you know, and taken upstairs and put on the bed and shaken and I'm like, okay, fine, but there's a break in the action. I don't know if you've got a good understanding of how the house is laid out, but the bedroom is at the back of the house, and there's like I'd say a 3-foot, maybe even longer, the hallway. Well, there's a bedroom, then a bathroom, then the kitchen, and the living room. So there's like the rest of the whole of the house that hallway runs. She testified that she was in the bedroom behind a closed door, right? Sat there for a couple seconds, looked over, saw the gun, and wanted to leave. Okay, she then stepped out into the hallway. I says, she was intending to shoot. You don't take a gun to an argument unless you plan to use it, in my opinion. Because there was no testimony that he had ever hit her. There was no testimony.
And let me just stop real quick, because you mentioned a couple times about her being an MP in the Air Force. And so that made a difference to you, right? She knew how to use a gun. She was trained how to use a gun. And she knew, but this wasn't just some housewife that just wasn't sure what to do and was shaky and just grabbed a gun. That made a difference to you, right?
She was military security with a marksman award. I mean, I was in the Navy. I was in the military. I didn't have a marksman award. They just showed us what the gun was. We went out and got familiar with it, and that was it. Because you don't really shoot guns in submarines too much, you know, because it doesn't work well. But so she was higher qualified than I was, and she was trying to be a military police person. You know, so she knew how to use that gun. But I think her anger got ahead of her.
Yeah, angry. So, okay. So for you, so the sticking point was this, in the jury instructions, it was all about the situation. When
When did
the
it start?
situation started, and for the not guilty people, they think the situation of the night, and I'm using my invisible quotes, nobody can see me on screen right now. The not guilty people think the situation of the night started at the party when she caught him trying to do drugs and a fight started.
Allegedly.
And allegedly, okay.
Yes.
We have to back up just a little bit because I love this. I talked to Scott in length before this show, and he believes very little of Colleen's story. So we probably should back up just a little bit about her testimony, and maybe talk about who believed what in that jury room from Colleen's testimony. Colleen testifies that they're at the bar. That's when they leave the bar, she finds out that he spent all the money that they had, and a fight starts there. They go to a party, and she walks in, and he's leaned over getting ready to do a line of like what we all presume is cocaine, and that's a fight, and he drives home drunk. I'm just quickly going through this, and there's a big fight, and he yanks her out of the truck and carries her in, and it's this whole big battle. So Scott doesn't necessarily believe that. So you tell everyone, Scott, that what you don't believe of Colleen's side.
Okay. I don't know whether or not ingest a drug or not. Granted, they did find a straw beside him, and but the
well, no drugs were found in his system.
That's right. That's the only thing. That's a fact. So you got to go with that fact. So whether he was fooling around, or whether he wanted to, or he might even said, you know what, I'm going to go back out and get my drugs that I couldn't finish, and I'm just leaving this girl alone because she's crazy, and trying to get out of the house. I think that's what the defense is trying to, or the state's trying to say anyway. But the drugs was a non-issue for me.
Okay.
Okay, it really was, because when they weren't in his system, if that's what happened that started an argument, that shouldn't lead to a 10-bullet shooting. Okay, because any normal person would just, hey, well, do what you want to do. I'm out. Whatever, kind of a thing.
And then you don't believe he carried her in the house?
No, because the photos that we saw now. Yeah, unless she had time to go around and straighten up that house, which I don't know why she would, the shoes were set properly in pairs at the bottom of the stairs going out to the door.
Okay, so that evidence was crucial to you then. The pictures they showed of around the house, we saw that too in this trial. There were pictures on the wall right inside the front door that were good. The shoes inside the front door were good. So her story really didn't jive. So what about the other jurors that deliberating? When you were trying to convince the not guilty jurors, when you guys were battling back and forth, and you were talking about how her story for you she was lying, what were they saying to that?
They never gave us any of their thoughts on it. They just said, well, I believe that she felt she was in an abusive relationship. I believe that she felt she was in imminent danger, because I think the jury instructions said imminent or death or imminent bodily harm. Right. They were testing. They were, what's the best way to read it or say it? They were formulating opinion as to her state of mind instead of the facts at hand. Okay,
so let me get this straight. So the four that were sticking with their not guilty, they didn't care to argue, like, they didn't care if she was lying or not, or that part didn't matter to them, if she was lying on the stand.
I won't say that it didn't matter to them that they were lying. They just didn't have a rebuttal argument to why aren't the shoes all messed up? Why isn't, why, if you're sitting in your bedroom and you're saying, I'm out of here, I want to get out of here, and I'm taking this gun to make sure I can leave, wouldn't you put on a pair of shoes?
Yeah. Well,
you know what I'm saying?
I'm sort of asking it like this because for a lot of people that are watching this, they watched a high profile case out of Arizona, which as a little side funny note, I asked you before when we were doing our pre-interview if you knew of that case, and you didn't right off the bat know the name Jodi Arias.
No.
Which I said, well, you and my husband, those are the only two people.
Right.
Because there was a holdout juror in the death penalty phase of that just simply was only one holdout juror that would not vote for the death penalty, and she also would never give any reasoning, and she would not discuss it, she would not deliberate, she would not do anything. So we've seen it happen in some cases where no amount of discussion mattered, and so that's why I'm kind of asking the questions of, would they give reasoning, or would they, was it just forget it, no way? One of the questions I have for you is, how long did you guys deliberate in total, like hour-wise? I know they say 2 days, but do you know how many hours you deliberated?
I think we were given the case on a Friday. I think around 3 o'clock. And we went in, did some preliminary, or maybe it was a third. I don't remember exactly. I do know that we had to go through the weekend, I think, and come back on Monday. So it might have been around the same time, or Monday or Tuesday. April 22nd is the date I remember. Anyway, I think it was a total of 8, because we did 8 hours one day. We did like an hour and a half another, maybe a total of like 12 hours, 12 to 14 hours out of 2.5 days.
Okay. Sorry about that. So that's a long time. So even though this isn't an element to consider for not guilty, did you guys talk about, or did anyone on maybe the guilty, I guess the not guilty or the guilty side, talk about her level of intoxication being a factor, or giving her a little bit of a pass on that, or not a pass? Or did you talk about the level of intoxication that night?
I don't recall that, because it's kind of
interesting. I would have thought that would have come up.
Well, no, because she wanted that to come up when she said, that's the first thing she said. Hi, I'm drunk. Listen to me, I'm drunk. I just shot my husband. Plus, she shot 10 times and didn't miss. I don't think the alcohol impaired too much, of her motor skills. No, I don't recall the alcohol being a discussed a factor too much. They both drank too much, and they both shouldn't have. We just knew that. We were trying to, the main thing about the entire deliberation was attributed to her defense of, do you believe she was a battered woman? And that was it. We had to determine whether we agreed with the battered women syndrome first before we could get anything else on the table. We could not get past that.
Okay, so that's the major sticking point. The 4 holdouts, what we'll call them, and there was actually a 5th. There's 5 holdouts because the 5th could not be determined. So the 5 holdouts couldn't get past the battered woman syndrome, and we know the one of the 5, the woman, has abuse somewhere in her personal history.
She had intimated to that, yes.
Okay, and the 4 men, they could not get past the question of battered woman, and that is why they couldn't go guilty. So we know, and that was it. They couldn't get past it, and there was nothing that the 7 of you could do about that, right? Nothing.
No.
So
the facts didn't matter.
Now we're a fly on the wall. How heated did it get, Scott?
Some of us got at the end. We're frustrated, and I don't know about anger, but we're disillusioned and frustrated. I remember one of the jurors who actually had been more convinced through deliberations that she was guilty, was made a statement of like, this is just what's going on in the world today. You know, everybody doesn't want to be held accountable, kind of a thing. You know, and one guy who was kind of quiet. He just would lean up against the wall and listen. One of his comments were, "Look, she shot the guy 10 times. 10 times. I don't care what reasoning a person has for that. That's overkill. And if you guys can't understand that, there's nothing I can do to help you with that." I remember him saying that. So they were frustrated. And some people claim that they never want to do another jury again.
Oh,
They
that's
never want to do it.
You know, look, I can't blame them. I mean, how frustrating that is for you guys to be on a hung jury on both sides. I mean, I feel for the other 5 as well, even if I may not land on that side, because even though I like to stay neutral at times, I've watched the trial all the way through, and I think she's guilty. I do need to say about the charge on this, because if people are confused on it, the charge is murder. And in Ohio, that statute, it's not first-degree murder. It's murder, and the way it reads is with the intent to kill, and you can look up the entire definition. The possible sentence is 15 years to life. So this isn't about premeditation. And people ask about lesser included charges. That's why there's not lesser included charges, because it can be lesser included. The judge can go anywhere from, actually it's 18 years to life, because I think there's an enhancement with the gun.
Yeah, the gun specification.
Right, the statute's 15 years, but I think because of the gun. So she's looking at a minimum of 18 years up to life. So that's why it's sort of like when we see in our standard trials where they include a second degree and a manslaughter and all that, it's sort of already included in that, because he can go as low as 15 years. So they're not looking at, oh, she premeditated this, planned it ahead of time. Some people think she was already leading up to this with talks with the neighbor in November and life insurance money, which we can talk about in a minute. Some people think she may have already been leading up to this. I don't know if I feel that, but I am not buying her story. So for me personally, I'm not buying that. But back to what I was saying, on both sides of this, being on a hung jury is very difficult. And what you and I talked about before was why you reached out to me and why you wanted to at least talk about this. And you also said how shocked you were at the interest level of this, and how I told you I had all these questions for you, and how people were so excited you were doing this interview, and you just like, why would people outside of our community even care about this? Yeah. And you and I talked a little bit about trial watchers and how that is. But what you had told me, I told you I've heard from other jurors about how this has bothered you since April, and how you don't have closure. And I said to you, it's because, look, you're just a everyday average guy, was pulled off a street to do this. And you want to talk a little bit about your feelings you have about not having closure in this case?
Well, sure, I can touch on that a little bit. I want to tell your followers some things I had told you about the fact that if all evidence is the same, I had asked this question right at the end before we just decided, hey, we're dead. No one's going to move from their position. If all evidence being exactly the same, but the bodies were reversed, and she was on the floor, and he was standing there saying he was abused, and he was protecting himself, self-defense. What would you vote? And it was a unanimous guilty verdict. So I thought gender bias played into this situation a lot.
Ah.
Okay? And then I asked, I said, listen, this guy, Rob, had only been involved with this woman for a year, married to her for 8 months. Should his legacy that his son have to live with was that his dad was murdered because he was an abuser? And the jury foreman looked at me right in the eye and said, yes. I'm like, that is shocking to me, And then one of the other questions that I asked was, okay, I says, she has never really spent too much time in jail. She got in, she got bonded out, and has been under like house arrest with at her grandma's house for all this time. You know, I says, if anything, this woman needs to be sent down, and she doesn't think she's done anything wrong. She hasn't addressed any of her anger issues or her control issues. I says, would you, if we give her a not guilty verdict today, and she walks out of this courtroom, would you be happy to greet her at your door to date your son, your cousin, your nephew? Everybody just sat back and said no.
Even the not guilty.
Yes. Well, no, I wouldn't be too comfortable with that. Isn't that crazy?
Okay, so Scott, what do you think?
That's what's been bothering me.
Well, no, I agree. Look, I've never served on a jury, and my guess is I'm never going to. But I can't imagine. I've spoken to a few jurors now, and I've heard the same theme that you're saying, and maybe not the same, not closure, because you're the first juror that has. Well, no, I've spoken to jurors on the hung jury from the Jodi Arias, but that's a little different. At least she was convicted. Yeah. But the other jurors have nightmares because of what they had to see from crime scene photos, things like that. You know, it's a hard thing to pull just an average citizen off the street and put them in a world that they didn't ask to be put in, or they're not even really interested in, and all of that. But and so I, for one, am grateful for your service. What I want to ask you about is, do you think, what do you think's happening in that jury room right now? Do you think the makeup of 8 women and 4 men this time is making it any different in there?
You know, if I knew who they elected as jury foreman, I would have a better insight. Because
you believe the foreman has a lot of power in there, or influence?
No, not because of that, but that would tell me in the group format, if there's 8 women and they come out with a male juror, or the male, jury foreman, who's not willing to step up? Who's not willing to push their who's not willing to be vocal about their opinion? Because you can't go in there and be mousy. You cannot go in there and just go with the flow. That's not what you're supposed to do. And unfortunately, I think that's what some people try to do, so they don't have to feel responsible or accountable for influencing or affecting a person's life in a negative manner.
It's a hard thing. For anyone that hasn't served on a jury, it's hard to judge somebody because you have someone else's life in your hands. So it's easy for us to sit back, for us that are watching it to sit back and say, how could you not send them away? It's not. And so I don't know. I go with. It's easy. I go with you because you were there and you were able to do it, and I'm sorry that you don't have the closure that you need. Oh, one thing I just wanted to make sure that we get in here. I know that you have to go, and that's why in just a few more minutes I want to make sure I get all the questions in we can. One thing I wanted to make sure that we talk just a little bit about, because I found this interesting as well, and this happens with retrials all the time when they can. The prosecutor's office got a hold of you and talked to you before this new trial to ask you, pick your brain. So they had ideas of what to do and what not to do in this new trial. But fascinating enough, so did this new defense team. So I'm going to let you just talk a little bit about those conversations.
Okay. Well, I actually wanted to talk to the prosecutor because I had questions. Okay. And funny note, on the way out when I got done talking, it was the first time I ever talked to a prosecutor without having to defend myself. But they actually, in looking at the makeup of this new trial, took those considerations, because I had actually taken the weekend and wrote a 10-point page, things I would have done differently. And the gender biasing, you can see they address that with the makeup of this new jury.
Mm.
So we'll see how that plays out. I'm really curious about that. And then let me just kind of back up for your listeners. I do not judge or criticize my fellow jurors or anybody in that situation, because it's one thing to be, because when you're selected for a jury, you don't know what you're being selected for. As far as we knew, we could have been selected for a trial to award some monetary compensation for an insurance situation, which is a lot better, I think, than boom, you're just thrown into okay, you're in a murder trial. Here you go. Make a decision. And the gravity of a murder trial, in my opinion, has a lot more weight to it. So I respect everybody's opinion that went in there, and I'm glad and hope that they are all able to live with it. Now, the prosecutor did a great job in redoing the trial with is his name Sam? I can't remember. Oh, Bill. Who the new DA is? I can't remember the guy.
Dennis Barr.
Oh, Dennis Barr. I don't know why I keep thinking Sam, but his closing he emphasized that missing blood, and we would have had a different outcome. Not to criticize the previous prosecutor, but had they been able to spell that out a little bit better, because I learned more things in this trial than I knew in the first trial. With the close to be able for the bullet to hit both lips. Never dawned on me. I never saw that in the pictures, but it's true. He was able to point out different things. The fact that she changed her testimony a little bit sparked my interest. Well, that's different. I didn't hear that before. So the prosecutor has done a good job. The defense attorney, though, and when I talk to him, I'll be as straightforward with my recollection as possible. I told him, I says, listen, before we even talk, I'm going to tell you I voted guilty, so I don't even know why you're calling me. He says, well, I want to call you and ask you why you felt that. And he says, I've been given permission by the judge to do so, but right now you're the only one who wants to talk. I said, well, fine, I'll tell you what's going on. And she says, did you believe the spousal abuse? I says, no. The two forensic, okay, who was the last, the state's, it starts with a K, I can't, the one forensic.
Karpowicz,
yeah.
Say it, but yeah.
Love that guy. I still do. He and his testimony was consistent in both trials, and he's a sharp man, because Ian Freeman tried to trip him up about, well, you're paid for you're paid for your testimony here today, aren't you? And he looked at the jurors and he says, no, that's a trick question. I'm paid for my time. My opinion is based upon my opinion. Things
that's
like that.
That's a good answer, because that's asked of every expert in trials. So that's a good answer.
Yes, and I thought, and they tried to trip him up again this time, and she kept saying in her closing that it was the MMPI was honest and valid. That's not accurate. That's not what the MMPI does. And he tried to explain that to him, but they're trying to push an agenda, of course. But I thought it fascinating that they put that little video clip together with the firearm, alcohol, and anger words in it. I thought that was a good thing too, but you never know. Okay,
so guess what, Scott? I have been contacted by Ian Friedman, Colleen's defense attorney from the first trial.
I love that guy. Yeah.
And he said he has a question for you.
Sure.
He says, ask him who they thought Rob, this is the victim, who they thought Rob really was. For example, the level of Rob's violence and his character.
That's a good question, Ian. And by the way, hi, good, nice to talk to you. I appreciated everything you did and respected your job. I think he was quick. I think he got frustrated and acted out in frustration more than anger, and then felt bad about it. I think they should have separated way earlier. I don't believe. Of course, no one believes anyone should be shot that way. I think that if Colleen had come out of the bedroom 10 minutes later, he would have already been out the door. What happened? Okay.
I can still hear you.
Okay, yeah, I lost my camera because my battery's going dead.
All right, we're gonna wrap it up. Okay, that's a cool picture of you though. Okay. Oh, I think I just lost him.
No, I'm here.
Oh, we can hear him. Okay, so I'll just leave me up and we can hear you.
Sure.
You want to finish your thought?
Well, no, I just wanted to ask.
Oh, actually, I'll just ask you to finish up on Rob about who you thought he was. What I want to is what was more important is you didn't believe that Colleen was a battered woman, right?
Correct.
So correct. I guess about who you thought he was is you didn't think he was a wife abuser.
I think they both abused I think they were both physical with each other. I think the relationship was toxic. I think had they were, I think they could have. You know, I'm an optimist. I think that anybody can work anything out if possible, even after doing divorce work for 7 years. You know. I gotta ask Ian a question if he's still there. If you could ask him, if you.
He's not.
Oh, okay.
No, he sent me that question a little while ago, so I just now saw it.
Okay. Anyway, I wanted to know why he didn't. Why didn't he continue representing her? That's all.
I can put you in touch with him.
I think he's got my phone number.
Okay.
Well, I lost my train of thought. Oh, you always want to think the best in people, in my opinion. Rob did not deserve the outcome. I feel bad for his family. I think that he was weak in the fact that he couldn't control his frustration and anger, and they should have got counseling quicker. I think they should have gotten counseling quicker.
I agree with you. I think it was toxic. I think they were toxic for each other, and I think that they were both probably violent with each other, and I think they both drank too much.
Oh yeah.
And that was a
a
recipe for disaster. Okay, I'm going to let you go because this was the time you said you had to go.
Yeah.
Hey,
right.
I want to thank you so much, and I want to tell you what's been happening in the chat room during this entire show. They have been saying, "Tell Scott, thank you so much for doing this show. We appreciate it so much." When you were saying that you haven't had any closure since April and it's been bothering you, they have been saying things like, "Oh, tell him that we feel so bad for him." They said, "Tell him to come into Court Chatter's chat room and chat with us. We'd love to chat more with him. Tell him to drop by anytime." They're saying things like, tell Scott he's such a great person. Thank you, Scott. You did a great job. So I just wanted you to know those words. Thank you so much for reaching out to me. We love to hear from jurors because it's all the questions that we have during a trial. You were great, and I would like to thank everyone for joining us this time on Court Chatter Live, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Thanks, Kathy.